Read this anytime the world goes dark and the colors have left your mind. The doubt you feel is a lie. The world is a deceptive place, but everything you want and need is here today. I first saw it at the end of my travels. I had decided it was time to go back to school so that I could work to make the world a better place. Vague, yes, but I thought my ailments were psychological or maybe philosophical. I wasn't sure. I was to head back north, then work on getting into a graduate program for psychology. I wasn't worried about getting accepted. No, the worry was whether or not my minivan would make it back. The Smoky Mountains nearly destroyed the engine on the way down, and I'd have to traverse them again. The plan was to keep driving time to a minimum, hour a day max, less strain on the engine. Plus, before I could help improve the world, I had to fix myself. I was uncertain about everything. How could I give psychological advice if I was the one who needed advice? Imagine spending an hour a day listening to a patient's life story. Then after they've spilled their traumas, you look dead into their eyes and tell them, I don't know anything. Yes, it'd be ridiculous. The first time that scene appeared in my imagination, I laughed hysterically. But then my laughter dissolved because I thought I might be onto something. Again, the world is a deceptive place. We grip onto certain information, assume it to be fact, then identify with the information we are holding. The tighter we squeeze, the more it is integrated into who we are. When we find something that contradicts the information we believe to be true, we either let it go or hold tight and live out a lie. Either way, we fall. Free is the man who admits that he just doesn't know anything. Yet if I were to get a doctoral degree, I'd have to at least pretend to know things. Here you can see a glimpse of what was my problem. I don't believe I know anything, yet I need to know things to get a doctoral degree, which I thought would help me improve the world, but I also don't want to act like I'm someone I'm not. There was always debate in my mind. When there's always a debate, you don't discern the truth of the debate. No, eventually you become exhausted. Internally, the debate rages on and you have no peace. Externally, you stop making decisions and instead freeze like a prey animal. The gentle breeze blows you around and dictates your life. It was the gentle breeze blowing me around, dictating my life. It was the whisper of the gentle breeze that would deafen my ears. It all changed on a Thursday afternoon in Mount Dora. I was a few days into my journey back north when I stopped at a bookstore that doubles as a vinyl shop. It sits on a lake that I'd just finished running around for a few miles. Inside, the shelves, the floor, and the furniture are all made of wood. For the day, it was my brief escape from the southern heat. My funds had dwindled to just enough to make it back north, nothing additional. I grabbed a Steinbeck book off the shelf and began reading it. Immediately, I was entranced. It was nice to have a moment of reprieve from the internal debate. As I was immersed in the book, a young boy and his mother sat down on the sofa next to the armchair where I was sitting. The young boy was probably 4 or 5. I glanced up when they sat down and noticed him staring at me. I seemed zoned out and intent on having her own moment of reprieve. I continued reading my book, but out of my peripheral, I noticed the boy climb on the arm of the chair to get a closer look. He continued to stare. I was annoyed. Get your kid, I thought. Here I am finally with a moment of peace, and this lawless child is being allowed to stare at me. How could I become immersed in the story when someone is staring at me from 3 feet away? I looked up from the book and very deliberately turned my head to the mother so that we could make eye contact. With my eyes, I'd tell her to get her child under control. But she had begun reading and was too engrossed to look up at me. We never made eye contact. I cleared my throat to get her attention. Nothing. She kept reading. I rotated my head to look at the child. I gave him a dirty look so that he would think I was mean and leave me alone. What is that? He asked, pointing at the wooden cross around my neck. Once more I looked over at the mother of the child, who is now speaking to me. She was in the world of her book and unbothered. I sigh. It's a cross. A cross? Why is there a little man on the cross? He asked. Well, that's Jesus. Don't you know about Jesus? Jesus? Yeah, Jesus. I don't know about Jesus. Oh, okay, I said, turning my attention back to my own book. The young boy doesn't waver in his staring and eventually speaks up again. What does a cross do? You mean a big cross or a small one like the one I'm wearing? He smiles. Yeah. It's a symbol of God. God? Who is God? I pondered the question for a moment. In my pondering, I noticed the debate in my mind had gone silent. It's a good question, I told him. The young boy was thrilled to have asked a good question. With that, his mom finally chimed in and told the young boy to stop bothering me. I let her know it's okay and that he's not being a bother. The young boy, however, lowered himself back down into the sofa, turning his attention to a picture book. Everything about the interaction was surreal. I think time may have stopped. I wondered about that question, who is God? And I wondered, would I recognize God if he were on earth, walking in the flesh? Jesus? I don't know about Jesus. I don't know about Jesus. Yes. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Yes. Oh, yes. Doubt. Why do we doubt? Why do we doubt ourselves? Well, first and what's most relevant is what I can talk about is the doubt that I had in writing this story. Because last time I was talking about how it's important to me to write within my own voice and write about things that I care about and not be influenced by other people. And the doubt that was arising in my mind, I was portraying it in this story of the contradictions and the internal debate. And when I was writing this story specifically, the doubt crept in my mind. Like, I would write the story and then I would think, well, this isn't very descriptive. This isn't showing the reader anything. This is telling the reader things, but the things that it is telling them is abstract ideas, and it's not very. There's a mantra in writing of show, don't tell. Show the reader, don't tell. I was concerned that this was doing too much of the latter, telling. And so when that would come up in my mind, when that thought would come up in my mind, then I would go through and I would try to edit it. So I go through and I write the story. And the thing about when you're writing is you go through and you write and you're typing or you're writing with a pen and a paper, but regardless, it's slower than what you could actually speak. There's no chance that I could write as fast as what I could actually speak. But your first time through, for the most part, it's probably going to be close to your own voice. It'll be slower, and you may use words that you actually wouldn't use within your own voice, but for the most part, your cadence and your flow, it'll be close to seeming or being fluid if you were to speak it with your own voice. So I went through and I wrote it the first time, and then I had that thought in my mind like, oh, this is doing too much telling and it's not doing enough showing. So then doubt came in my mind, and I was like, let me make this better, so let me edit it up a little bit. And you go through then and you edit it, but when you edit it, you don't have the initial flow that you would have had that is close to the cadence of your normal speaking voice. And of course, you should write like you speak and speak like you write. Those two things, the gap between them should be as small as possible. They should be the same thing. So when I went through the second time after and was editing it, well, then I had doubt in my mind like, oh, now it's boring. The first time it was unintelligible, meaning nothing was being painted in a descriptive way, so I had to edit it. But then when I edited it, I thought it seemed a little bit more clunky and not in my natural voice, and ultimately boring. And when that happens, when you get into a state of doubt, well, then on the third day and the fourth day, you sit down in the morning to try to read or try to write, and maybe you reread what you'd written the previous day, or maybe you just start writing. But a temptation is in your mind, and the temptation is like, well, it'd be best to not write a story today because obviously there's something wrong with me, and I should just free write out all of my thoughts onto a paper because there's not going to be an intelligible story, so I need to realign myself and fix the problem before I start writing the story. And as I was writing this, that's what I was contending with, that doubt, that constant debate, and that final step that I'm referring to makes you like a prey animal, because my aim is I want to write stories. I want to write better stories. I want to put nourishing stories, inspirational stories, fulfilling stories that provide energy to people into the world. And I can't fulfill that aim if I'm frozen. And I'm frozen because of the doubt. I have doubt towards myself. So I was struggling with that while I was writing the story. Then eventually I just got to a point where oddly enough, the solution, it's always the same solution. It's always the same problem, and it's always the same solution. The problems always come up in that fashion of doubt. And the solution to the doubt is to not fight it, which is such a fascinating idea, and I want to go deeper into what I mean. You have this debate in your mind that I'm referring to. I have this debate in my mind, and we'll talk about it in regards to writing right now. So I've got this debate in my mind, and it's like one voice is telling you to go towards to fulfill the aim, but then the other voice is like a critic, and it's judging the way that you're going about it, and it's like, well, this is unintelligible, this is not descriptive, XYZ. And so that voice of criticism freezes the first voice, which tells you just write the story, just go do the thing. And so what I mean by not fighting with the doubt is to accept it, to let go. And it's something like, it's fine. As in, to that voice of criticism within my mind, yeah, you're right. You're right about all of these things. I don't care. You're right. It's a unintelligible story. Nobody can comprehend what it is that I'm trying to say. I would like to write nourishing stories, meaning I would like for stories to be of benefit to the world, but I'm not capable enough to make that happen, so it's not going to be a benefit. You're right about all of those things. Now shut up. Now just shut up. And so rather than contend against that voice of criticism and be like, no, I am. This is a good story. I am a good writer. I am a good storyteller. When you contend against the doubt, against the criticism, the opposing voice just becomes louder. The enemy within yourself. I'm not saying the voice of criticism within yourself is the enemy. It could be your greatest ally. But whether the enemy is an external person, whether your enemy is the state, whether your enemy is the voices within you of criticism and doubt, if you fight against the enemy directly, then what happens is you start to play their game. And that is the only way that the enemy can actually win. Again, it doesn't matter if it's a person, an external person, a government entity, or a critic within your own head, doubt within your own head, negative emotions within yourself. The only way that those things can actually win is if you fight against them, because then you're playing their game, and you're not focused on upward trajectory, traveling onward, just doing the thing and being true to yourself and being the best version of yourself and aiming towards heaven. And I believe that to be a natural law. And you can see it it's why when you fully understand what it means to turn the other cheek, it is the most profound idea. To turn the other cheek is the way to freedom. Because if you have an enemy, external person, government entity, voice within your own head, if you have an enemy and you play their game and you debate against them and you contend against the things that they're saying, then you become like your enemy. They're debating against you and you're debating against them. You're fighting a monster and you're becoming the monster that you fight. You're staring into an abyss, and then when you stare into an abyss, you are the abyss which you're staring into. Yes. Yes. And I fully conceptualized that when I heard this quote of Nietzsche, read it or heard it, I don't remember. But Nietzsche says, don't fight with monsters unless you will become a monster yourself. And don't stare into the abyss lest the abyss stares back at you. So the only solution, it's a downward spiral. So you've got external or internal enemies that are fighting against you. And if you fight back against them, you become like them. And so it's a downward spiral. You feed into that negative energy. And the only way to get out of that spiral is to turn the other cheek. Just let them strike you. Let them do whatever they're going to do. And in the Bible, Christ is talking about turning the other cheek, and he gives two examples. He says, if somebody hits you, turn the other cheek. But also, if you are traveling with a foreign military and one of the soldiers makes you carry his equipment for a mile. Well, don't just carry it for a mile, carry it for 2 miles. And that's profound, because if you then put yourself in the shoes of the soldier who had made you carry his pack for a mile. So now this soldier has made you carry his equipment, and he's like, you're going to carry this for a mile. It's heavy. I need you to carry this for a mile. And then you, rather than look at that like a punishment and dread it and complain the whole time, you just carry it for 2 miles. He's going to look at you, and it's going to be like an epiphany in his mind, and he's going to be like, why is this guy carrying my pack for 2 miles now? Why is he going above and beyond? Somebody hits you, and the reason why they hit you is because they themselves are clearly hurt. And if someone is hurt and they're lashing out at you verbally or physically, and they strike you with the intention to hurt you, if you strike them back, then you're feeding into that negative energy. And their perception towards the world might be, you don't know their whole past. They might have had a horrible childhood, a horrible past. The whole world might be pointed against them, and it might have been pointed against them for their whole life. And they feel like everyone is against them. And so when they're lashing out at you, trying to hurt you, what they're trying to do is get a response from you so that you'll hurt them back, and you'll affirm the lie within them that the whole world is out to get them and the whole world is out to hurt them. But if they hurt you and you just accept it, and you accept it and you absorb it, then the lie that is within their mind, it is a lie. It's not truly who they are. People have the capacity for good. They're not inherently evil. Nobody is inherently evil. It's a lie within their mind that's telling them to lash out at you. Then through absorbing the pain that they're trying to put onto you, you strengthen their character, their true self, and you weaken the lie within their mind that is telling them the whole world is against you, because they see you and they're like, well, this person's not against me. I was certain that if I punched him in the face, he would punch me back, or if I said something so cutting about his family, that he would respond and try to hurt me as well. But he didn't do that. Very interesting. The world is not as bad as I thought it was. Maybe they'll just have a little thought in their mind that, hey, maybe the world is not as dark and antagonizing against me as what I thought it to be. Small gestures make the world a better place. Yes. Yes. So don't fight monsters unless you will become a monster yourself, and don't stare into the abyss, or the abyss will stare back into you. And in regards to the internal aspect of it, the doubt in my mind that I feel is that I look out into the world, and obviously what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to write stories, and I'm trying to put good information out into the world. And it's a struggle. I'm living out of a vehicle. It gets really hot, have a lot of doubt in my mind, start to feel sorry for myself. And I'm like, well, maybe I'm just not capable enough, and also maybe this is not what the world needs. And then I look at the plastic corporate culture, the fake corporate culture. I look at the wreckage of politicians and hyper wealthy individuals who are in a strange relationship with each other, perverted relationship. That's what it is. and they're wrecking the public, and the food that we eat is all horrible, and there's a lot of selfishness happening in the world. And I want to, I truly want to not add to that. I want to put into the world things that I believe are beautiful and are good, rather than things that are, rather than content that is beneficial for, selfishly beneficial for myself, or working a job that would make me money and wealth, but wouldn't necessarily be good for the clients or the world as a whole. So I say that because what am I going to do instead? What are we going to do instead? Just because that's the state of the world, there's one option, which is to go against that. And sometimes it kind of feels like I'm going against the whole world, or to integrate fully with the world and just accept the I don't know. It's like the I was talking about Constantine a while ago, and where we're at right now. People compare us to the Roman Empire, and it really is like the fall of the Roman Empire. But more specifically, I don't think we're at the time that is like the fall of the Roman Empire. We're at the time that is like the Christianization of the Roman Empire, where prior to Rome becoming a Christian empire, there was the pagan cult of Rome, the imperial cult of Rome, and they worshipped leaders, and they were looking for their emperors and their generals to save them and give them food. And you have these martyrs who popped up, and you have Saint Alban, who was in the UK, and there was a fleeing priest who went to what is now modern day UK, and people were persecuting priests, and this individual went into Alban's house, and Alban was like, just give me your clothes. Give me your priest attire. I'm going to wear your priest attire, and you go on. You wear my clothes and you go live your life. I'm tired of playing this game that the imperial cult of Rome is wanting me to play. I'm not going to have a hand in persecuting priests. I'm not going to worship these false idols that they want me to worship. Just give me your clothes. They're going to take me to court. That's fine. They're probably going to martyr me. That's fine. Whatever happens can happen. And it's all okay because I don't have another option. We're out of options. We've got a path of hope and we've got a path of no hope. And in the Roman time, the path of no hope was to continue indulging in the imperial worship that they were involved in. And the path of hope was just living on a prayer, as in Jesus Christ. I've heard a story about Jesus Christ, and he was in the Middle East, and they persecuted him to the point where they put him on a cross and ended his life, and then he resurrected after 3 days. That is the only hope. That is the only place where hope exists. If they martyr me, I pray to God, hopefully I can end up like him and I can be resurrected as well. But to continue with this worship of war and conquer and giving all of our energy to false leaders who are truly weak men, and who are the type of weak men who have made society bad at this point. We've got politicians who freeze on camera all of the time. Literally freeze on camera. It's ridiculous. Yes. Ah, yes. So I say that because I have doubts in my mind, and it's like the thing that I'm up against is pretty large, and I don't really always feel super capable, but I just keep the essence of this story. This is part one of the story. It's cut off at the middle. There is a second part of the story. In my opinion, the first half of the story answers why do we struggle with doubt? Why do we have doubt towards God? And the second part of the story will address, well, how do you grow in faith? How do you have the opposite of doubt, which is faith? But the essence of this story is why do we struggle with doubt? And the character gets to the point where he hears this question from a curious, innocent child, a child who he'd been unjustly mad at for no reason, just for staring at him, even though the child comes to improve his life just through inquiry. And the child asks, "Who is God?" And the character is like, "Oh, that's a good question. Who is God?" And then it opens up something in the narrator's mind where he's like, which is a really fascinating question to ponder and reflect on within yourself. But if God was, you can just look at God as ultimate reality, perfect love, perfect truth. Those three things at the furthest end of the spectrum, perfectly aligned. If that entity was walking around on earth and you met him, would you recognize him? Or would your attitude be like what the narrator's attitude initially was towards the child? Like, why is this person bothering me? Why is this person annoying me? My life is already so hard. I'm lacking in peace, and I'm trying to have a moment of peace just by reading this book, and this person is annoying me. But if you came across God, would you recognize him? And that's what I try to keep my focus on. Is I try to grow closer to God every day. I waver, of course, which is why I write a story about doubts. It's doubt of self and mistrust of God. And I'm not saying I'm mistrusting of God, but if you want to know what a person believes, don't listen to what they say, watch how they act. And I watch how I act sometimes, and I can see that there are times in my life where I'm mistrusting of God. And I try to eliminate that. I try to recognize it and eliminate it, and just keep my attention on what is good, keep my focus on the highest good. And I think part of the solution is that it isn't an idea. I do believe God is a being. God is a being. And you can know God, which is why it's kind of absurd to ask this question of, do you believe in God? Do I believe in God? It'd be like if I told you about somebody that I know and had an interaction, like I've spoken about Joel in this story, or in previous stories, I've spoken about Joel. And so if I told you about somebody who I knew and I know, and then I told you about things that he has done and ways that he's affected my life, and then after I told you all of that, you were like, do you really believe in him? It's like, well, that's kind of a crazy question. It's not a matter of, do I believe in him? I know him. And then you could take it a step further, and you could be introduced to that individual. And I think sometimes in life we're introduced to God and we have intimations with God, whether through other people or through events or through church, through any sort of interaction that essentially comes from the divine, as in God is reaching out to you. And God has reached out to you, and then after we're in a room and God or a person makes you laugh and makes you cry, and he affects your life, but then he leaves the room, and 5 seconds later you look at me and you're like, you don't really believe in him, do you? It's not the right question. It's not the right framing of the question. Because yeah, I do believe in him because I know him. He was just here. Not only do I know him, you have known him too. We all know him. So the framing of the question, do you believe in God? It's absurd. It is absurd. Yes. Yes. And I've thought about, it's funny to think about people who are agnostic, because I would say I've inadvertently acted agnostic within my life, and as in maybe I would tell people that I believed in God, or maybe I wouldn't have, but I was acting like I didn't know. And I would say it makes more sense to declare atheism than it does to declare agnosticism, because agnosticism is declaring that I don't know. And God is it's a pretty important thing to know and to have a opinion about. You can't be too hot or you can't be in the middle. You have to be hot or cold. And at least for people who are atheistic, they try to reconcile. They're explicit about trying to reconcile a way to live, despite the fact that they believe God doesn't exist. But somebody who is agnostic, they're just being blown around in the wind, and they're like, well, I don't know. I'm not for sure. It's like, well, if you're not for sure, you better go find out right away. You better let go of everything else that you have and go make a decision. You better find God. Go to God. Right. Okay. So, everything that we want and need is here today. Everything that we want and need is here today. If you live in the past, you will be depressed. If you live in the future, you will be anxious. If you live in the present moment, then that is how you'll be at peace. So if you're looking towards the future and you have a vision for the future and you've clung to it so hard and you're like, I need that to happen, but I'm doubtful that it'll happen. I believe and I'm speaking forth that it'll happen, but there's a little bit of doubt in me. Well, then there will be contention, and you'll certainly be anxious, and you'll never be at peace. You will be a house that is divided. And if you look into the past and you've made mistakes and you're focused on the mistakes that you've made rather than learning from the mistakes, then you will see yourself as incapable and incompetent, and you will be depressed. You'll be depressed over the character that you are. The only way to be at peace is everything that exists within the present moment. The present moment is what is real. We need to inject ourselves within the present moment. That is how we will be at peace. You learn from the past and then let it go. You look towards the future and maybe set goals, but you don't cling to the goals that you've set, because at the end of the day, it is God's will that will be brought to fruition. We don't have the power to control everything. It is God's will that will be brought to fruition. And if you take that posture, then you can live in the present moment and you can be at peace. And that is where everything that you want and need exists.